Hi and welcome. I have made a series of videos where I am going to show you how I knit stranded colorwork socks like these. I will go through every step from the top of the ankle and down to the toe, and I will show you some variations and different ways of doing, for example, heel and toe. So you are now watching episode 1, and I am going to show you how I cast on and make the ribbing. And when I knit socks, I want the rib to be equally elastic here at the edge and the rib itself, so that when I stretch it, it does not stretch a lot here and become tight at the top. So to achieve that, I need to cast on in a manner that does not create stiff and unelastic edge here at the top. So there are many ways to cast on, and many will already have their favorite, and now I will show you mine. So here I have my yarn, and I have 5 double-pointed needles. I know many prefer to knit socks on circular needles, and that's just as good as using these, but my favorite is the double-pointed needles, so I'm going to use those. So to cast on, I begin by making a slip knot like this. Here I have my yarn end, and I place my slip knot onto a needle. Here I have my working yarn, and I gently pull just to make the first stitch here sit close on the needle. And now I'm ready to cast on. So I secure the stitch here with my fingers, and I hold the yarn here between my middle finger and my thumb, and then I use my index finger and I begin underneath the yarn, and I move up and I twist, and now you can see I have a loop around my index finger, and then I place my needle on top of the yarn and I move down to the tip of my finger and I slip the loop onto the needle. Then I gently pull the yarn to make the second stitch sit close to the first one, and I go again. Finger underneath the yarn, up, twist to get the loop around my index finger, needle on top of the yarn and move down to the tip of my finger and slip onto the needle. And now I will continue until I have the number of stitches required on this first needle. And about stitch numbers, when you are knitting socks, you are probably following a pattern, and in that pattern there will be information about stitch numbers. And what I do is that I take the stitch number that I should cast on and I divide it by 4, and then I try to cast on the same number of stitches on 4 needles. So I distribute my stitches as evenly as possible on 4 needles, because it is not always possible to divide the number by 4. So then I will just do the closest thing to it. So now I'll just count my number here, It's a bit too much. And now I will pick up my next needle and I'll place it behind the first like this. So I cross the needles right where I cast on the last stitch. And I just secure it there, and then I continue. First stitch, I make sure it goes close to the last stitch here. And then I continue. And when I have finished the cast on, I will get back to you and show you how I knit the rib itself. So now my cast on is finished and I'm ready to begin the knit the ribbing itself. And I will do a knit 1, purl 1 rib, same as the one I showed you before. Of course you can do other combinations like knit 2, purl 2, or knit 3, purl 1. And a lot of creative people out there make cables and lace patterns and a lot of nice ribs, but I will show you a knit 1, purl 1. I first organize my needles so that I have here, you can see the yarn end. This is the first needle I cast on. This will be the first needle on my round. And here I have my working yarn. This was the last needle I cast on, and this will be the last needle on the round. And those two needles I place on top of the two others. This I do because I think it is easier to work when I have the needles organized like that. When those two are on top, I think they are easier to move and work with. And so I get my 5th needle and I'm ready to begin to knit the rib. So I simply knit 1, make sure I place the stitch I just knitted close to the last stitch on the last needle, and then I purl 1 and repeat. Knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. And now you may have noticed I have a gap here, a single thread between my needles, and this is because of the method I used to cast on, because the stitches are kind of just twisted onto the needle, and because of this they are slightly unstable, and if I pull the needles apart I will get a much larger gap, and if I pick up the next stitch I can make it smaller again. So if I pull the needles apart, to mend that I knit the next stitch, place it close to the last stitch I did, and I just don't pull. I try to keep a slack on this piece of yarn here. And I continue. And there are a lot of different ways of doing things when you are knitting, and many of you will have a different purl technique than I have, and I use the purl technique I do like this because I think there is no unnecessary movement that tire my hands, and I think it's fast, efficient, and of course it was the way I was taught, so I have always done it this way. So now my first needle is done. Here you can see where I pulled the yarn. It will look a little bit uneven. You can make it go away by pulling the stitches a little on the next round. And when I begin on a new needle, first stitch, make sure it goes close to the last stitch I did, and then continue. And this gap will follow me around on my first round, and after the second round it will disappear, and the result will be the elastic edge that I showed you before. So now I will continue until I reach the beginning of my round again here, and after that I will continue to knit rounds where I knit the knit stitches and purl the purl stitches, and I will do so until my rib has the length that I am looking for, and when it has the right length I will get back to you on how I finish the rib and get ready to start the color work knitting. Now I have finished the rib. You can see here elastic edge, and I am now ready to begin the last round before starting the color work part of the ankle. And what I usually do when I have finished the rib is that I knit one round in stockinette using the same color as the rib. And the reason why I do that is because I think that the first round of the pattern looks more even than if the last round before the pattern is knit and every other knit and purl stitch. I think it looks better if I have knit stitches only when I start the pattern. And if I need to change needle size, this is the time to do it. In many patterns it is recommended to knit rib and color work into different needle sizes. What I usually do is that I choose my needle size. I choose the needle size that I need to get the right gauge on my color work part, and then I go down maybe half a size for the rib. This is because the color work part is not as elastic as the rib, so this helps preventing the rib to become too wide compared to the rest of the ankle. So here I have my new needle, and I will begin to knit one round in stockinette. I can mention that not everybody needs to change the needle size, because we all knit in different manners. Some knit very tight and others loose, so you'll have to try and find out what result you get if you changed needles or keep the same. Sometimes I do both. Sometimes the yarn acts different as well, compared to another yarn, 2 yarns. Okay, so I will begin, and I will do knit stitches only. So I knit the knit stitches and I knit the purl stitches, and I simply knit everything over onto my new needles. And now you may notice that when I pick up the knit stitches, I pick them up from left and to the right, but when I pick up the purl stitches, I go the opposite way. And this is because of the purl technique that I use. Because if I pull the stitches apart here, you can see that the knit stitches and the purl stitches, they angle in the opposite direction. So when I pick up the knit stitch from the left and I look at it, you can see that it opens up nicely and it creates almost a square. That's what I want. I want to have an open stitch when I knit it. If I did the same with the purl stitch, when it is twisted the opposite way on the needle, I go from left here just to demonstrate. I will twist the yarn at the bottom of the stitch and it creates a triangle instead. So I don't want to knit the stitch twisted, so I go the opposite way so that it opens up the same way. This will only happen in the first round of stockinette, where I am converting the purl stitches into knit stitches. After that, you can see that they're all angles the same way, same direction. So now I will continue to knit throughout the round, and after that I am ready to start the color work section of the ankle, and I will demonstrate how I do that in episode 2. Thank you for watching.